climate. She is a head of policy and climate change and coordinate not only the Wetlands for Climate project, but she also led the other projects, Life Agri Adapt, and is quite well experienced also in preparation of biodiversity certificate in the ongoing project. The next one will be Jakob Bussmann. He is a member of the team of integrated project ZENAPA. This is integrated project for climate, and based and the coordinating beneficiary is the University of Applied Sciences in Trier. Jakob's background is business and international material flow management. And the last, not least, in our group is Max Kolb. He is Sustainable Finance Officer at NABU. NABU is the oldest and one of the largest nature conservation foundation in Germany. And the NABU, with several very important partners, prepared large project proposal, PLP live project biodiversity crew for testing biodiversity certification schemes and credits in Europe. So this is our group, and I would like to give the floor to Nat and Dan. The floor is yours, and set the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, very much. I can't see my slide. Ah, yes. Just to give the background, I'm just going to speak for under 5 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes on describing the context, and then leave the technical description of the biodiversity credits to Dan Exton. I don't know whether anybody can see my slides yet. Oh,
yes, now we can see.
Good, perfect. Yeah, so Fundatio Adept, this is the kind of landscape we are dealing with. And next slide. This is where it is. Central Romania, southeastern Carpathians, a very important area of lowland grassland biodiversity. And it's a complex area to work with because we have 30 villages, at least 3,000 farmers, probably 5,000 farmers, and 33,000 hectares of high nature value grassland, of which hay meadows are the jewel in the crown, and unfortunately they're being lost even now. Next slide. And the landscape is not only very rich in directive habitats, as you can see, 10 forest habitats, wood pastures, priority scrub, meadow and pasture habitats, including 3 priority, and a lot of landscape features like gallery forests and things. And that is a haven for extraordinary fauna and flora diversity. Next slide. We've been working in the area for about just over 20 years. And as you can see, this is the list of some of our current projects. You can see that we've been working a lot and very successfully with LIFE, though I will just mention the problem for NGOs of finding co-financing is a burden. It restricts the size of the LIFE projects. But we have several projects. I won't go through them all, but I'll just mention Katarina Tahorska earlier in the earlier session mentioned that Life Metamorphosis, the butterfly project we're working on with BROZ in Slovakia, that mentions biodiversity credits as a sustainability replication aspect of the project. And I know the Commission is very concerned with afterlife, maintaining the results of life projects. And I mentioned biodiversity credits as one of the ways we're going to maintain the results of metamorphosis. Next slide. And the problem is that many of the projects we have carried out have solved problems at a relatively small scale, a few hundred hectares, but how can you save 30,000 hectares of grasslands and support all the farmers who are maintaining them? And in spite of all our work, and I have to say Târnava Mare is probably one of the most supported and studied grassland areas in Romania as a result of our activities and our partners. We work a lot with universities and, of course, farmers and local communities. But in spite of all of that, we have had success in geographically quite small areas, hundreds, maybe 1,000 hectares, but how do you support 30,000 hectares? And we have threats of poor financial reward. Agri-environment measures currently are incentivizing the loss of hay meadows, not the maintenance of hay meadows. We hope to work with the Commission, the Romanian government, to improve that. And loss of young people, loss of mosaic management, etc. And mosaic management, I should mention, is one of the sources of biodiversity. And all of these things not only create a biodiversity poor landscape, they create an economically poor landscape as well. Next slide. This is my last slide before I introduce Dan. For 10 years, we've been luckily working with Operation Wallacea, with whom we've been doing schools monitoring programs, which provide fantastic, free annual monitoring by schools. And it's funded by the schools or by the education systems of the countries concerned. So that's a brilliant way of having regular, repeated monitoring under the supervision of academics. But returning to my question, how do we find scalable and effective funding to meet this threat? And we're now developing with Operation Wallacea and the Wallacea Trust and its business spin-off Replanet, which Dan will explain. We're now developing a system under which farmers will receive payments for 25 years to manage land under results-based schemes which are locally designed, and they don't have one-size-fits-all unsuitable conditions imposed on them. So we can have 25-year locally designed results-based schemes. There will be annual management payments to farmers and regular detailed monitoring throughout the 25-year period. And this will all be paid for by the private sector. This sounds like a dream, but actually it's about to be reality, and Dan will explain why. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks very much, Nat, and yeah, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Yep, excellent. Okay, next slide, please. I'll start with a quick introduction to Replanet. Nat set the groundwork pretty nicely there. So we're a spin-off company about 4 years old from an older organisation, Operation Wallacea, that Nat mentioned. Operation Wallacea for a long time, 30 years, has been very successful at monitoring and studying biodiversity worldwide. But we had the classic academic crisis of confidence that we were doing a very good job of measuring how bad things were getting and not a particularly good job of doing anything positive about it. And so we founded Replanet as a way of trying to address that misbalance. Next slide, please. And so the focus of Replanet is to restore nature at a global scale. We do that through the generation of carbon credits, biodiversity credits, various different funding mechanisms. But we like to do it in a way where the main beneficiaries of those projects are the local stakeholders. And by benefits, we really mean financial benefits there. So, we believe these types of projects should primarily be driving income into the communities that are living side by side with nature. And so the last 4 years has taken us on a bit of a journey through how carbon credits can better improve nature, how innovative financial mechanisms like biodiversity credits are needed to plug the gaps where carbon can't reach or shouldn't reach, and various things in between. So I'm going to spend the next kind of 5-10 minutes talking you through, I guess, the Replanet case study for our approach to biodiversity credits. I should probably mention that at last count, there are about 55 different methodologies out there for biodiversity credits. Ours is one of them. For full transparency, I would consider at least 75% of those methodologies to be pretty poor quality, but there are a good number of high quality, scientifically robust methodologies out there. But I'll focus on ours. A, it's the one I know best. B, it's probably the most widely used globally at the moment. And one of the reasons for that is because it's open access, publicly available. And so anyone can use it free of charge without having to come and work with Replanet. So there's a lot of accessibility benefits there too. Next slide, please. And so the methodology was really developed to match Replanet's ethos to project development. We're scientists. That's all of our backgrounds are in science, ecology, and biodiversity. And so the work we do is underpinned by good science. We want these projects to be done in a way where local stakeholders benefit. And we want to find ways of combining both climate and nature into blended projects rather than, approaching the two separately or hoping that carbon will somehow mop up nature along the way, which I think we can all agree hasn't worked to date, and there's no reason to think it will work in the future. Next slide, please. So the problem we have is this, that there's a fair amount of money sloshing around from the private sector, and at the moment the vast majority of that floods through the carbon market. We're talking not far off $1 trillion per year. However, very little of that money makes its way through to nature. And so really the challenge is, how do you unblock that funding obstacle? And there are a few reasons why we think we're in the situation we're in. Carbon credits, have not helped the way they've been structured, where the cheapest, most accessible, highest volume carbon credits have been those that have no nature benefits, such as renewable energy credits. That has kind of kept money from flowing into nature-based solutions, carbon markets. Probably the biggest of all is how to measure the impact of investment. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this in a minute, but put yourself in the position of these private sector funders. You're going to your board of directors, your chairman, your shareholders, asking them to sign a check for millions of dollars potentially to invest in biodiversity. Unless you can give them a clear and transparent and easily understood way of measuring what that money is going to achieve, they're not going to sign that check. And so that really has been one of the biggest challenges we've had to face. And then finally is this issue that I always refer to as sacrificial ecosystems. And I think Nat's project in Transylvania is a fantastic example of this. If you're a restoration project in the Brazilian Amazon, you can pretty easily fund your project through carbon. You don't really need any other innovative financial mechanisms. But there are lots of ecosystems out there that don't store enough carbon or even any carbon to be financially viable through the carbon markets alone. And so for me, those are the perfect use cases for where we need separate, innovative, nature-focused financial mechanisms like biodiversity credits, because otherwise, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a tropical coral reef ecologist by background, and coral reefs are incredible ecosystems for many, many reasons. But one of the reasons they're not particularly useful is carbon. They don't really store any. And so if we are only allowing funding to reach nature on the back of carbon, we're essentially kissing goodbye to Romanian grasslands, to tropical coral reefs, and these many ecosystems that don't really have a carbon element to them. And I suspect, I've got no data to make this to back this up, I suspect we'll end up doing more harm to global biodiversity than good, because we'll do an excellent job of protecting a few ecosystems and a terrible job of protecting all of the others. Next slide, please. And so the solution, we think, is a separate standalone market specifically targeting biodiversity, a voluntary biodiversity credit market. We think that's how you unleash the power of the public sector. When we look at some of these throwaway numbers, very little money flows from the private sector directly into nature currently. It's mostly public sector funding, which, as fantastic as that is, it's not massively scalable. It gives us an opportunity to bridge that funding gap that we know exists in nature conservation. If we could replicate the carbon market for nature, we've gone a very long way to solving the problem globally. However, this has to exist separately to carbon. It can't be another add-on to the carbon market for reasons I've just explained. And on a socio-economic level, because of the localized nature of biodiversity compared to carbon, and the fact that biodiversity is so concentrated in often the poorest areas of the world, it represents a real opportunity to flow wealth from the global north to the global south and address some of those wider socioeconomic inequalities that exist. Next slide, please. And so it brings us back to this challenge around measuring impact, because I always use the carbon market as a comparison, because it's a mature market that we can learn from, both from its mistakes and from what it's got right. One of the real advantages the carbon market has is there's a very easy, obvious measure of impact, and that's a ton of CO2. And so no matter whether you're planting trees, sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere industrially, any other type of carbon project, you can measure the impact of that project in a comparable, fungible way. Now, that just doesn't exist in biodiversity. I'm sure Jan will agree with me. If you put 100 ecologists in the room and ask them all how to measure global biodiversity, you'll get 100 different answers, probably more than 100 different answers. And so how do you account for the fact that biodiversity differs so much between habitats and ecosystems, ecoregions? And then at the same time, how do you strike that balance between scientific rigor, keeping the academics happy, when the whole point of an academic is to search for perfection, right? And on the other hand, the buyers of credits, who are arguably the most important people in this process, right? Persuading companies to part with their hard-earned money. And so you need a methodology or a measure of biodiversity that is complex enough that it's scientifically sound and it passes the stress tests academically, but is also simple enough that a non-expert can grasp it very, very easily. And so one of the first things we did when we founded Replanet was to go about trying to create a methodology that ticked these boxes. Next slide, please. And so we had a whole list of criteria that we wanted this methodology to address. First of all, we wanted it to be truly global. We didn't want a situation where you needed, one methodology for Romanian grasslands and one methodology for Brazilian rainforests, and you end up with 1,000 different methodologies all working slightly differently. So how do you build in flexibility to a methodology, but in a way that you can still account for the variation between different ecosystem types? And so some sort of a methodology that can be modified was really what we were going for. Next slide, please. We then thought long and hard about how should a project that's doing good for biodiversity be rewarded? Because the obvious option is just number of species. If we think of biodiversity as just the variety of life, then are you just rewarding projects for the variety of nature that they have in their project, i.e. the number of new species they've added or protected? And we thought, well, actually that's a little bit too one-dimensional. That's too limited, right? Because I can foresee a whole number of scenarios where a very successful project may not add many or any new species to the list, but what they might do a very good job of is boosting the populations of the species that are already there. And so we wanted a methodology that rewards projects for their number of species, rewards projects also for the abundance of those species, and also rewards projects for doing good for the most threatened species. So weighting their rewards based on the conservation status of the species they're helping. Next slide, please. We then wanted to build in that scientific integrity. So we wanted to use well-established traditional ecological survey techniques. If that means boots on the ground with binoculars and clipboards, then so be it, rather than chasing technology for the sake of technology. Use it where it's right, don't use it where it's not. We wanted our methodology to be results-based. So you're actually rewarding projects based on the improvement that they can evidence rather than the activities they're putting in place that they hope will lead to positive change. And we also then wanted to look at the ecosystem level, I suppose. So look beyond single species or even single taxonomic groups, but try and get as close as possible to an ecosystem level picture of what's going on. Next slide, please. We then took what is probably a very terrible commercial decision, but I still think was the right decision, to publish the methodology open access. And so we did that through our charitable partner, the Wallacea Trust, of which Nat is a long-time trustee, because we wanted to maximize impact. We didn't want to hide this methodology behind a paywall, as most methodologies are. We didn't want everyone to have to funnel through the bottleneck of Replanet. We wanted this to be adoptable and applicable to anyone. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to focus on that communication piece, right? The need for it to be easily understood by corporate people, buyers, financiers, those types of people. And so we took our inspiration from the consumer price index, the way we measure inflation, because at the end of the day, economists are trying to do a very similar challenge with economies in terms of measuring how the British economy is inflating versus the Romanian economy versus the Japanese economy, all functioning in very different ways, but you need a number that is comparable. And we're trying to do the same with biodiversity. An economist's solution is to use the basket of goods and services approach. So we stole that idea essentially, and we use the basket of biodiversity metrics approach. And so what this looks like in practice, next slide, please, without going into massive amounts of detail, is something like this. You select 5 metrics based on the conservation objectives of your site. So those 5 metrics for Nat's project in Transylvania will be very different to the metrics you might choose for a tropical rainforest project, but you still have a basket of 5 metrics to choose from. You go out and you survey each of those metrics. I'll give some examples in a second. You then weight your data based on abundance to reward projects that are benefiting populations. You then weight your data based on conservation status to reward projects that are benefiting the most threatened species. You track each of those over time. It gives you a percentage change in each of them. And the number of biodiversity credits you have earned is the median of those 5 multiplied by the number of hectares that your project is working on. Next slide, please. So a very simple example, Transylvanian grasslands. These are the 5 metrics you might choose. They're taxonomic level metrics. They give a good reflection of the ecosystem of a Romanian grassland. These are the hypothetical numbers you might get. Over 1,000 hectares, this would give you 450,000 biodiversity credits. Next slide, please. Taking a totally different type of project on a tropical coral reef, these are the 5 metrics you might choose. And so the metrics are different, but the way you work with the numbers is the same. And so you end up with a comparable value at the end of it. Next slide, please. And so bringing this back round to the Transylvanian grassland example, as Nat explained earlier, you've got these traditional farming practices which are extremely important for maintaining biodiversity at risk of industrialization, as farmers have to chase their profits that they're losing from maintaining traditional farming methods, right? This is a great example of a system where carbon just isn't sufficient to fund what's needed to be done. That's not to say that we wouldn't target carbon here too, because it's still the low-hanging fruit for private sector finance, but it needs something extra. So it needs to tap into both carbon and biodiversity benefits separately. Now, the plan for this project is to use carbon and biodiversity credits and the income they'll give the project to essentially subsidize farmers, to provide farmers with 25 years of annual payments via bespoke contracts to maintain their traditional farmed landscapes. And the additionality for this project will come from an avoided loss model. So we are avoiding the further loss of biodiversity rather than trying to restore lost biodiversity. And we've modeled the project should end up paying somewhere between 150 to 180 euros per hectare per year, growing by 3% per year with inflation, which seems to be a kind of the magic number to really make a difference. And then final slide, please. In terms of the current status of this project, to date, we've really focused on the supply side and getting the project to a point where we're ready to start attracting private sector investment. We've done the biodiversity baselining, we've done the carbon baselining, we know how many credits the project is likely to generate, therefore we know what we have to offer to a farmer, to an investor, and we know how much the project is going to cost. It's now listed, for example, on the Dow Jones database of biodiversity credits available for market. You can see down towards the bottom there, the Tanava Mare Avoided Grasslands Loss Project. The next challenge is now stimulating that demand, and that's really where we're at with the biodiversity credit market. Most investors have been sat on the sidelines waiting to see what methodologies emerge, what projects emerge, what does supply look like before they start to engage. And now we're starting to see the first signs of the private sector being ready to move. And so the challenge over the next months and years is to keep on increasing supply and dealing with that side, but really focus on the demand side. And then next slide, please, just to finish. I've stuck my email address on there in case anyone has questions that they don't have time to ask today. But yeah, a bit of a whirlwind tour, not much time to get into too much detail there, but I know we've got plenty of time for questions. So over to you, Jan, as chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nat and Dan, for this fantastic introductory speech. Then definitely will bring some ideas and some question. I'm just repeating, please use the Slido, and may I ask the technician to display the Slido QR code maybe once more for the audience, that they can join the Slido for placing the questions. Maybe they will do it soon. Yes, thank you very much. For everybody who likes to place any questions so far to Nat or Dan, and during our discussion with the panelists, please use the Slido, and I will try to ask the questions, give the question to our panelists as far as the time allows. Thank you very much. And actually, I do have already some question here, and they are very similar to our internal discussion yesterday among the panelists. You said that actually you like to have an exclusive certification and crediting system on biodiversity. So, but yesterday we actually have heard that from several the presenters that actually the wish would be make a blend system with all ecosystem services and so on. So combine the benefits of the activities for the credit and the evaluation. So what is your explanation for say you like to be exclusive in your system?
Yeah, I'll tackle this one if you like. It's a good question. I mean, I think fundamentally, all we really care about is benefiting nature, right? And I think most people in the audience will probably agree that the funding mechanisms we use to address that, it doesn't really matter. That's a secondary issue for us. I think it's very much a case-by-case basis. You know, I think if we were approaching a project right now, for example, the easiest way to get money into a project is carbon. If you have enough carbon in your system, don't even bother with biodiversity credits. There's no point. Get the money in, do your project, have your impact, move on. the next most logical step is probably biodiversity after that, but there are lots of other ecosystem services coming in. And so I think it very much, I'm a big fan of having as many options as possible for people developing projects to pick and choose the ones that best fit their narrative, that best fit the specifics of that project. But then there's also on the flip side of that an additionality argument. Okay, we have to be very careful that we're not just adding more and more different payments for ecosystem services together without thinking about the additionality that they're bringing. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've got a project and the budget for that project is $1 million. If you can get $1 million from carbon, it's very difficult to make the argument that you need another million from biodiversity credits. Essentially, you're selling biodiversity credits that aren't actually having an impact, because the impact from the project is purely going through carbon at that point. And so I think we have to be a little bit careful for the integrity of the market to make sure that we are, our approach is financial additionality, really simple. If the project needs more funding, that's your argument for going out and raising a separate form of capital. If it doesn't, and it's just profit chasing, then I think it becomes a lot harder. So there's no right or wrong answer to it, Jan, basically, but those are some thoughts on it anyway.
Thank you. And I will give the floor to Vanessa. Actually, because we raised this issue yesterday as well. And she also is, with her project, developing credits on wetlands. And actually, we discuss also her opinion. Vanessa, do you have your opinion about this?
Yes, thank you, Jan. Well, in our case, we developed a live project that it was about creating carbon credits through the management and restoration of Mediterranean wetlands. So we made all the methodology to measure the carbon balance in wetlands after applying some management or restoration actions through soil, water, and biodiversity. And at the end, since we must ensure through the carbon market, voluntary carbon market, we must ensure additionality. We can only sell the credits we increase. I mean, a wetland is already mitigating climate change, but only with the actions that we implement, like mowing vegetation or ensuring grazing and so on, we can ensure that additionality. Then the carbon credit is very high. I mean, we have arrived to implement a pilot project, and we have a carbon credit very, very high price in the market, as Dan Nathi commented. So we have measured, of course, the co-benefits on biodiversity, because we are restoring habitats of interest community. So we know how much we increase biodiversity there in abundance, relevance, and so on. So when we are looking for investors for this project, then what we must ensure to them is what can they include in their policies regarding the corporate sustainability reporting directive. I mean, the ESG indicators they must include in their count of the balancing account they have to do, the private investor, the private companies. So they need to know not only how much carbon are they compensating, but even how much biodiversity they are creating. So in my opinion, when we are speaking about this kind of ecosystems and we must ensure this additionality, that the biodiversity you gain and so on, I think we should arrive to an offer of, well, we have this restoration project and you can ensure here this carbon gain in carbon credits, this biodiversity gain in biodiversity units, and this water footprint gain in the case of wetlands, because we have a water footprint there too. So that's the only way we can ensure that investors will include money here. But again, it's the same option, the same philosophy that Dan explained. If you don't have carbon anodes in your ecosystem, that is the case. I mean, Mediterranean wetlands have a lot of carbon, but we'll only ensure additionality, and we will only be able to shell a small amount of carbon after the restoration actions we can implement in our Mediterranean wetlands. So then you need to go ahead with other kind of gains you have, like biodiversity, water, and so on. So in my opinion, I think we should try, at least for wetlands, create a full ecosystem services where we can ensure different facilities or indicators to the private investors to gain the investment in the projects.
Thank you. Well, but as I understand, you have the door opener via carbon, and you have the all additional benefits on top. Yeah. I would like give the floor. Thank you very much, Vanessa. I would like give the floor to Max. I guess in preparation of your proposal, you have scanned all different approaches which exist. What is your opinion about the scale, actually? Because Dan talked that he likes to start with the global, like the matrix of the all general approach. But you surely have also experience or how to solve the issue from getting global up to local. This is the very important issue, and we have this problematics of small projects, even on the carbon. But even more difficult will be maybe on the biodiversity. What is your opinion about the scale and the costs for getting on the local municipality scale and so on?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, great point. I think it's the general debate of how scalable it should be on an international level and how applicable it should be for the local circumstances. And I think no one has the answer yet. And I think that's kind of the goal of our project, to see what fits best. In our case, that will be European wetlands. And yeah, we can only guess so far where this will end up. But I think it's really important to have both perspectives in mind, considering carbon benefits or co-benefits, as well as here, I would just take a very pragmatic approach to really see what works best. I mean, it was mentioned as well that the costs of monitoring are not so high, while not really sacrificing scientific methods. I think there are many things that have to be fine-tuned, and it's difficult to foresee where this will go, which approaches will survive. I think for sure it won't be one biodiversity methodology that will suit all different types of ecosystems all over the world. But I won't think it will stay at the, I don't know, 50 that we are at the moment. I think it will end up somehow in between that number, but to foresee what number this will be and how they will then interact upon themselves, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, thank you. So finger crossed that you get the project running, because it's very important. I give the floor to Jakob, the Zanapa project, because actually we are looking for different methods and methodologies and so on, different scale, but getting from the preparation of the scheme up to realization, up to the commitment of all stakeholders and approval is a long way. And as I know that Jakob can maybe tell something on his thorny way of getting this biodiversity crediting system of the Napa project real. And it is, if I am quite informed, it's still not officially launched yet. So could you say your experience on smaller scale biodiversity crediting system from the region, and the obstacles and, let's say, barriers you experience on the way of this development?
Yeah, thank you, Jan. So first of all, we are at micro scale. So we are talking about very small organizations working in and around nature protection areas. So we want to include larger numbers of stakeholders into climate and biodiversity protection. So therefore, we developed a multi-criteria certificate, which takes into account carbon credits, which takes into account regional added value and biodiversity. So you see already there, we combined 3 dimensions, so it's getting quite complex. And this flexibility is a big problem for other people to follow, to also give us feedback on our methodology we applied, because it was all new developed. It was just one of 40 actions again in CINAPA. And therefore, we contacted quite a lot of different organizations, asked them about their opinion. So far, the feedback was always good, but no one wanted to grant us anything if this could be applied on a national level. So right now, we will apply it in our CINAPA core areas. We will certify certain projects, just see how is the feedback from the population who will use it. And we will see if someone is actually interested in purchasing it. Because in the end, the market will be also a big challenge. So we still need time and money to further develop this project.
Thank you. So it means that the targets to get a national scale will start actually with the demonstration of the smaller scale, like the best practice demonstration, and then with the hope that there will be some breakthrough. Okay, thank you very much. I have a very interesting question here for Nat. With so many farmers, how you will organize the certification? Will there be bulky process or even formation of cooperation? The Romanian landscape, the farmers, the farms are very small, so the land tenure is completely different. How is the logistic of the process in Transylvania?
In most cases, we'll be working with grazing associations.
Okay.
So every village has a grazing association, and it might have 50 or 60 members. And so that's the level we will work at, because then we can arrange, we can consolidate the contract writing work. But it's very exciting that we can custom make the management regulations or the results-based targets. We can custom make those according to each valley, because each valley has quite might have different, or we can compensate for different things. But you're quite right. To work with individual farmers would be impossible. So there are local action groups which are effective way of passing the message through, and they represent probably 20 or 30 villages, local action groups. And then we have these grazing associations. And we work with the presidents of the grazing associations, increase their capacity, increase the trust within the associations, and all of those things at the same time.
Thank you. And now, similar question. I don't know if you will reply or Don. If you look for the result-based payment schemes like in Ireland, and so on. So your approach for the crediting and certification, is it that you also honor the high value grasslands already, which exist to protect them? So I hope so, but could you explain? So not that it's just getting better, but also keep the high standard.
Yes, as Dan explained, it's an avoidance of loss scheme, but we've designed the scheme so that grasslands will have 3 levels of payments. And so a bit like we did a results-based pilot funded by the Commission a few years ago, and we've learned a lot from that. So we're going to have 3 different levels of payment according to the results, the diversity demonstrated by those parcels of land, and people will be able to move up. So there is an incentive to improve, but basically we're trying to prevent the destruction. But people will also have an incentive to improve as well.
Yes, exactly. This was my intention to ask, because the destruction danger in Romania, Bulgaria is enormous, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the most important, is keep what we have than to destroy and restore, you know.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's a lot more difficult to restore.
Okay, I would like to ask one question to everybody of you, because we are slowly going to the end. We have a lot of questions, and I have to clarify then with the organizer how to deal with a non-answered question. I'm very sorry for that. But to keep the equality to everybody, that he can answer my final question is, where is it? Yeah. Could you say one top of, or one or two action or the messages that the government can initiate improvements of biodiversity credit market? You know, the message for the decision maker, for the authorities, for the governments, what is your wish? What you would propose? And I like to pass this question to everybody of you. Nat, you can start. Short, please.
I'll be short. One of the advantages of this is that it is parallel to, but it's not restricted by a government policy, because sometimes government policy can be a very blunt instrument that is not finely tuned. So having said that, advantage of being semi-detached is great, but also I think particularly thinking of the Romanian ministry, they are cautious, very cautious about supporting this, but they have their own farm advisory systems and that kind of thing. So my Christmas wish from the Romanian government is that they should understand and give their backing, and be a little bit courageous, give their backing to this approach, and then promote it through their own channels of communication.
Thank you very much. This was from this, let's say, Romanian scale opinion, and I would pass to Dan shortly. Let's say also other member states in Europe. You know, what is your experience and what is your Christmas wish?
Well, I mean, I think one obvious option is, the development of compliance markets for biodiversity credits to force those schemes. The danger of that for me is you end up with too many disparate programs between every country that don't necessarily function as one. What I'd love to see is the government focus more on the demand side, and actually starting to put more legislation in place that legally requires companies to report on their nature impact and beneficial investments, because I think that will really unlock the demand that we're currently lacking.
Thank you very much. And the next, maybe Vanessa? Could you?
Yeah. Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
Yes, I will add to what my colleague said before, because of course I think, like Dan asked, that we should, I mean, the government should, or the policy makers should create a voluntary corporate engagement scheme to integrate biodiversity credits, as they are doing with carbon removal framework. And but of course we need to go beyond offsetting, because we need to think about the mitigation hierarchy mechanism. I mean, biodiversity credits could serve as a compensation mechanism after the impact reduction, but they should generate net positive impacts. I mean, rather than merely offsetting damage. I mean, this means that it should be shifted from a compensation mindset to one proactive restoration, and we should go most to insetting projects that benefit local biodiversity gains, more than go to these offsetting projects that in the voluntary carbon markets have brought many times difficulties and some greenwashing scandals that we should avoid.
Thank you. Thank you. Max?
Yeah, great points, Vanessa and Dan, especially as well. I think with the CSRD and other regulations, the groundwork was laid also with like new life projects going in that direction from the governments to create this market. I would just advise to now not slash it all down again. I mean, with the omnibus regulation, there's potential threat of these regulation becoming a huge drawback, and we see as an NGO a growing demand from companies actually towards projects, credits, and we think that's great. Now to have this political backwinds again, or the hope from companies maybe to get it cut is really bad to this growing demand. And another point would be, don't overestimate the power of biodiversity credits as well. Like I think it can contribute definitely, but it shouldn't be used as an excuse to stop government funding that goes directly into restoration projects. And I think that's something, we should, and every government should have an eye on to not be used as an excuse.
Very good points. Very good points. And last but not least, Jakob.
Yeah, I agree.
After your experience, your wish.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. After everything said, I totally agree, and I think there are really good points. I'm going back again to a smaller level, and I would like to have it included in the German Emission Trading Authority. So it should be Emission and Biodiversity Trading Authority. It should be taken on that level, and then we would have some authority, official authority to address this topic. That would be good, I think.
Good point, considering the system of the German authorities, the necessity, something like this. Yes, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes more. I would like to maybe just address the issue of the greenwashing, which the term of greenwashing was already mentioned 2 or 3 times already now. And so it's really important that they are really robust, scientifically based methods for monitoring of the process and so on. Maybe, Dan, you can close our session with your opinion about the robustness, but clear metrics and so on the different scales, and what is your opinion? There is always fear about the costs. We have also the demand from the Commission say, okay, if you enlarge, your projects area, if you expand, only the monitoring of the success of the impact could be so expensive that will block actually the whole process.
It's a big question. I think fundamentally we all need to be comfortable with the fact that we're trying to measure something that's very difficult and therefore very expensive to measure. We've seen a lot of methodologies come out that are trying to bring down costs, but all they're really doing is adding uncertainty and making far too many assumptions. Methodologies that claim to be based on satellite imagery only. Last time I checked, measuring biodiversity from space is still a long way from feasible, right? And so I think biodiversity has become a bit of a buzzword. Everyone wants their methodology to be a biodiversity credit methodology. All companies want to be claiming some sort of biodiversity benefit. But I think we have to have some red lines there. I think those claims should only be made if there's a genuine attempt to measure biodiversity, and that is being done in a scientifically robust way. So I think from our perspective, that's the part of the greenwashing conversation that we can really take ownership of, that we're only offering the private sector credits that are high quality, scientifically robust, backed up by evidence, and also that acknowledge their limitations, right? Because there will never be a perfect biodiversity credit methodology. we'll never know how to measure biodiversity perfectly. Let's be honest about that. The other half of the greenwashing argument is, I think, probably another area that governments can come in more and take responsibility for ensuring that companies are following the mitigation hierarchy properly. They have well thought through, genuine ESG policies, and that they're buying these credits for the right reasons and making the right claims against them.
Thank you very much. So there is the golden bullet, definitely not.
No.
And if I can close with my Christmas wish, let's say Easter wish, it's closer. I very like to see so many questions in Slidos, and I also in the other sessions what I could actually watch. And my wish is that the Brussels, the Commission, keep the momentum, and that there will be activities and somehow like that the Commission maybe make some units like a hub on the biodiversity credit where all this information can be exchanged, you know. So all these initiatives are popping up like mushrooms everywhere, but it's a really difficult to keep all the information, you know, from all those different channels. So we have to really streamline all our efforts, and then we'll even speed up our results, you know, and lesson learned and the best experience. Okay. I would like to thank you very much to all those panelists or presenters, our great team. Thank you for listening us. We have no access, we do not see the audience, but thank you very much. And I would like to please just to repeat what has been said at the beginning of this session. There will be closing remarks today. So please go back to the lobby. You have it now on the screen and the slide, how to do it. Follow the instruction on the slide. So go to the lobby, join the main plenary session, which start in 1 minute. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Nat, Dan, Max, Vanessa, and Jakob, in the order I see on my screen. Great job, and definitely we keep in contact anyway.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.